Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Monday, August 14, 2023. FEMA Administrator Deanne Criswell says she believes the government has enough resources and staff on the ground in Maui, Hawaii to respond to the wildfires that have killed at least 100 people and caused billions of dollars in damage. White House Press Secretary Kareem JeanPierre asked about criticism that President Joe Biden has been on vacation the past few days while the wildfires ravage Maui. A grand jury in Fulton County, Georgia, begins hearing testimony that could lead to the indictment of former President Donald Trump over his trying to reverse his loss in the 2020 presidential election in that state. Donald Trump with a number of posts today, including this one: "No, I didn't tamper with the election. Those who rigged and stole the election were the ones doing the tampering, and they are the slime that should be prosecuted." Today is the 11th anniversary of the kidnapping in Syria of American journalist Austin Tice, and his mother, Deborah Tice, makes a personal appeal to President Biden to finally bring him home. And another U.S. military command, the Navy, now under acting leadership due to Senator Tommy Tuberville's hold on military nominations as a protest over the Pentagon's new policy on reproductive health care, including abortion. We'll hear from the Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin at today's relinquishment of office ceremony. And out of the response to the wildfires on the Hawaiian island of Maui, the official death toll is nearing 100, making those wildfires the deadliest in the U.S. in more than a century. But the number is expected to rise. Governor Josh Green telling CBS News that crews may find 10 to 20 bodies per day over the next 10 days. And in his words, it's impossible to guess what the final death count will be. Property damage also extensive. Estimates are in the $5 billion range, and survivors need help now. The administrator of FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, Deanne Criswell, joined the White House briefing remotely from Hawaii.
As residents continue to mourn the loss of their friends, their loved ones, their neighbors, the loss of their homes and their way of life, we know and let them know that we are mourning with them. Nothing can prepare you for what I saw during my time here, and nothing can prepare them for the emotional toll of the impact that this severe event has taken on them. And as you heard, I have been in continuous communication with the president since these fires started. I have been giving him updates and his team updates, letting him know what the federal family is doing to support everything that Governor Green has asked for. A part of that, at the request of the state of Hawaii, FEMA has activated our Transitional Sheltering Assistance Program, which is now available for eligible residents who were displaced from their home. This is FEMA's hotel program, and this will allow them to move from shelters into pre-identified hotels or motels temporarily as they develop their long-term housing strategies. This is in coordination with the governor, as he has also stood up a program to provide Airbnb rooms or other hotel rooms to support residents. And we will be working in close coordination with each other to make sure that everyone finds a temporary solution as they begin to develop their plans for rebuilding. We're also focused on getting funds into people's hands so we can help with some of their critical urgent needs. This is called Critical Needs Assistance, and it provides $700 initially to provide food, water, first aid, medical supplies, other just critical needs that they need right now. This is in addition to what they will also be able to be eligible for in cash assistance for the loss of their homes or the loss of their personal property. So I encourage anybody who has not registered for FEMA assistance yet to go to disasterassistance.gov or contact 1-800-321-FEMA to get into the system and start this process. We also have over 300 personnel on the ground. Many of those can help you also register, as we understand that connectivity is still scarce in some areas. The response and recovery efforts, I just want to note, in Hawaii are going to be a whole of government approach. We rely on the experts of dozens of our partner agencies to make sure that we have all of the right resources to support the recovery needs for this area and to make sure that we are successful in providing relief to survivors.
Deanne Criswell is the administrator of FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, joining by video from Hawaii today's White House briefing in Washington, D.C. She was also asked and said she does not recommend that President Biden travel to Hawaii to tour the wildfire damage, and that the focus should be now on the response. Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, Republican from Colorado, posted over the weekend, "There is a total crisis in Maui, 3,000 destroyed homes, 80 people dead. Where's Joe Biden? On vacation, of course. There is no bottom for this president." The White House Press Secretary Kareem JeanPierre got a question about this today at the briefing.
Hawaii. How does the White House respond to critics who have suggested that the president should not have been vacationing at the beach over the weekend as the Maui crisis became the worst wildfire in a century?
So a couple of things, and I've said this multiple times. The president is certainly deeply concerned about the people in Maui, to the point where he has mobilized a whole of government approach here, as he has done many times to deal with these wildfires in Hawaii from the beginning. You've heard directly from the administrator. From day one, FEMA has been on the ground dealing with this. There's more than 300 personnel, FEMA personnel. We've talked about the 50,000 meals. We've talked about the 75,000 liters of water, the thousands of cots that are out there and blankets. And there is more than a dozen federal agencies who are dealing with this issue right now that we're currently seeing in Maui, and it is a devastating sight. And the president and the first lady has been very clear about offering certainly their condolences and making sure that we continue this whole of government approach. That is not going to stop. The president has also committed to being there for the government of Hawaii, the people of Maui, for as long as it takes. And sadly, we have seen this before. And so, look, you heard yesterday he received 2 updates from the FEMA administrator. Criswell was on, as she's on the ground, as you just heard. As the Governor Green stressed yesterday as well, within 6 hours of receiving Hawaii's request, President Biden signed a major disaster declaration and ordered all available federal resources in the state to help with the response. And Governor Green described this as having provided amazing support for recovery, because the president was able to do that within those 6 hours. Senator Karine, who I said the president spoke to just last night, he thanked the president for the immediate support of federal agencies have delivered for residents of Hawaii, and so has Senator Schatz. Look, you heard that from the president. I'm going to quote him from what he said on Thursday, which is he's directed what we surge support of these brave firefighters and first responders and emergency personnel working around the clock. I'm going to make sure the state has everything it needs from the federal government to recover, because the president is deeply concerned and is going to continue to be there for the people of Maui, the government of Hawaii, for as long as it takes, and that is his commitment.
So should the American people be seeing the president on the phone, working the phones, talking to officials, rather than seeing him on the beach?
You all have gotten full reports on who the president has connected with. You all have heard from us when the president has talked to the governor, you heard from me about talking to the senator, you heard directly from the administrator, and you've heard from the governor and the senators on the ground saying how much they appreciated the work of the federal government, the work from this president. And I think that matters. I think that matters that the folks who are on the ground, the elected officials, are saying that they're receiving the help that they need to deal with this devastating issue. And that's what you're going to continue to hear from this administration, and that's what you're going to continue to see. Again, the administrator was there for 2 whole days on the ground by the president's request to make sure that the government has what they have, the local government has what they have, the people of Maui have what they have, and that's what you're going to see. When you talk about a dozen agencies on the ground helping and assisting, more than hundreds of FEMA personnel, that's what matters. That's what matters to make sure that they're actually seeing on the ground the people who know how to work this, who know how to deal with these type of devastating events, who can be helpful to them on the ground doing just that by the request of this president.
The White House Press Secretary Kareem JeanPierre at her news conference in the White House briefing room. President Biden returned from Rehoboth Beach, Delaware today to the White House. He plans to visit Milwaukee, Wisconsin tomorrow, and on Wednesday mark the anniversary of his signing of the Inflation Reduction Act, and on Friday he'll be at Camp David for a trilateral meeting with the leaders of South Korea and Japan. Hawaii News Now reporting that the state attorney general's office said it would conduct a comprehensive review of critical decision-making on the Maui wildfires, which have left dozens dead, razed entire communities, and destroyed thousands of structures. The review comes amid mounting questions about why sirens didn't sound and concerns that residents weren't told of the dangers earlier, giving them more time to leave. Congresswoman Jill Takuda, Democrat from Hawaii, her district includes Maui, was interviewed on Sunday on CBS's Face the Nation.
The state claims to have had one of the largest hazard warning systems out there, something like 80 sirens in the Maui area. How did this system fail to warn those people to flee?
Well, you know, everybody who's ever lived in Hawaii knows the warning sirens. It goes off once a month at the beginning of the month at 12 noon and it blares. And if it doesn't, it gets fixed because that is our first line of defense. Unfortunately, in this situation, sadly, tragically in this situation, those sirens likely did not go off. The warning signals that were on cell phones, we had no cell coverage or electricity in some of these areas. And the reality is with those warning signs, it tells all of us to turn on the television or look at our phones or turn on the radio. The reality is with how fast this burn was, and you could see it in the videos that survivors were showing me, you could see it in the wreckage. If you turned on your phone, you turned on a radio, if you even could. Remember, things were out at that particular point. You would not know what the crisis was. You might think it's a tsunami, by the way, which is our first instinct. Yeah. You would run towards land, which in this case would be towards fire.
Congresswoman Jill Takuda, Democrat from Hawaii, on CBS's Face the Nation program on Sunday. The issue of rebuilding energy infrastructure after the Maui wildfires came up today at a discussion in Washington, D.C., hosted by EOPA, Elected Officials to Protect America, which its mission statement says is to create a safe, prosperous, healthy planet. We empower bold leadership from elected officials and civic leaders to protect our environment and fight the climate crisis. An audience question to the moderator, the group's president, Alex Cornell de Hoek, former Democratic state representative from Maine, brought up the issue.
Yes, someone briefly mentioned the situation that happened on Maui. I'd be very interested in the panelists' thoughts on if they were a council member or representative, what they would do moving forward, you know, to help the people of Hawaii.
Yeah, we just had we have a certificate in public leadership with elected officials to protect America and the University of San Francisco. And we actually had strong representation from Hawaii at that conference we held over the weekend. And that was a discussion point because, sadly, the devastation there looks like it's a war zone. It really does. It's really, really heart-wrenching. But moving forward, that is also an opportunity to rebuild with 100% clean energy that makes the area much more resilient. Right now, they're still having problems with power, right? So, for example, when the solar panels field was hit in Ukraine, the missile destroyed a few of them, but within 2 days, they were back at operating. So when we have storms and other natural disasters that can destroy part of the energy infrastructure, it's so much more resilient and distributed, right? So a house that has solar on it that survives doesn't have to wait for the entire community. And that became a large part of the discussion, is how we can leverage, for instance, the FEMA funding that is preventative with the IRA to protect cities and states like that. So in the future, we're ready and we are resilient.
Alex Cornell de Hoek, president of Elected Officials to Protect America. Today's discussion in Washington, hosted by that group with state and local elected officials talking about climate-related spending. An article from Reuters about the Maui wildfires reads, "The causes of the fires have not yet been determined. The National Weather Service had issued warnings for the Hawaiian Islands for high winds and dry weather, conditions ripe for wildfires. Nearly 85% of U.S. wildfires are caused by humans, according to the U.S. Forest Service. Natural causes include lightning and volcanic activity, and in Hawaii, less than 1% of fires are due to natural causes." That reporting from Reuters. The wildfires in Hawaii also mentioned today as NASA Administrator Bill Nelson spoke at a virtual news conference about new climate data from NASA, which confirms that July of 2023 was the hottest month ever recorded. This year is likely to be one of the hottest years ever, and next year could be even hotter.
Certainly is self-evident that the Earth is heating up. And what we find is that July of this year, the temperatures are the hottest ever on record. If you compare it back to July of 2019, that was the hottest. And now this July has shattered the previous record from 2019 by 0.2 of a degree Celsius. So just look around you and you'll see what's happened. We have record flooding in Vermont. We have record heat in Phoenix and in Miami. We have major parts of the country that have been blanketed by wildfire smoke. And of course, what we're watching in real time, the disaster that has occurred in Hawaii with the wildfires, which were in part fueled by a typhoon or hurricane that was out in the Pacific. Well, we're trying to do something about this. And I'll take you back to when Senator Joe Biden and Sheldon Whitehouse and I were some of those senators who warned what was coming. And now, as president, Joe Biden, he's warning again, and he has a climate agenda, and that is very specific. And we can go over the details of that for you, but not only is it addressing the wildfires, the electric grid, the biggest climate change bill that has passed in the history of the Congress, all of that is happening. And I can tell you that NASA is all in. Most people think of us as a space agency or an aeronautical research agency. We are also a climate agency. And why? Because we have all those assets up there that are taking very precise measurements of what is happening.
The administrator of NASA, Bill Nelson, in a virtual news conference today with scientists from NASA and from NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, on the latest climate data. This is Washington Today. New York Times reporting former President Donald Trump stepped up his broadsides against the investigation into election interference in Georgia today, calling the district attorney phony and the grounds for the investigation ridiculous. One of his posts on Truth Social, in all caps, reads, "Would someone please tell the Fulton County grand jury that I did not tamper with the election? The people that tampered with it were the ones that rigged it." C-SPAN spoke this morning with Brianna Tucker, Washington Post deputy politics editor, about what to expect in the Georgia case and how it plays into the 2024 Republican presidential primary campaign.
We're expecting to get some news this week. Fulton County DA Fannie Willis has said that she is expecting to bring charges to what would be Trump's fourth indictment. So it's a very busy week, as you can tell, and his legal scandals and alleged crimes in this case are mounting. So we're expecting to get that news as early as possibly tomorrow, and we'll be following this very closely. Obviously, this is one of the biggest possible indictments that we'll see in regards to the 2020 election, specifically in Georgia, because this has been such a contested case. Prosecutors have began to collect evidence in this case now, connecting his allies and really enforcing that this was a top-down effort to not only interfere and tamper with Georgia voting databases, but really skew the election and subvert democracy.
But the former president's legal woes seem to just boost his campaign. News reporting today talking about how it continues, each indictment continues to boost his campaign fundraising. What's more, it appears he was the popular favorite at the Iowa State Fair over the weekend. Tell us a little bit more about the problem that poses other candidates in the Republican field.
I think what we're seeing, we're just seeing that this really emphasizes, the hold that we're hearing, not just from voters, but also from Republican strategists, that Trump has over the Republican Party. He is the highest polling candidate. And secondly, with DeSantis, who was also at the Iowa State Fair, still significantly trolling behind him. And we've seen even in Iowa, the way that, his entrance from, previously he landed in a helicopter years ago. And even this time, you could definitely notice that his presence was there. Our reporters, even though Trump stayed maybe for a few hours at most compared to other candidates, there were certainly operatives from Florida and who had endorsed him that he had brought along with him, who were passing out, kind of taunting media to say, be more likable, Ron, and really exert his influence over this. But even the voters we talked to in Iowa, a lot of them that we've spoken to have said that they are still very much with Trump. Some of the quotes that we would hear were, he's not our, this isn't how we do things in Iowa. He's a New York businessman. We want someone who's more professional, but they were definitely saying that they are still in Trump's corner. They pointed to some of his policies and feeling like he's gotten a lot done. And I think it's been interesting to see that dynamic unfold even with the rest of the GOP field.
So is he under more or less pressure to appear at the debate? What is it, 9 days from now, next week?
Well, we will see. I think what we're watching is kind of a spectacle, and we've been following, former President Trump for quite some time now. We know that he likes, a show. He does like having that attention and focus on him. And so we'll see. He has said that he's expected to make the decision that he has decided, but he won't actually reveal his decision until we get closer to the debate, which is August 23rd. But I do think that whether or not he will be there or won't be there, it will be an interesting, case either way, because his presence will certainly be felt if he's not there. But I also think it's fair to the voters to say that you are attending to see what your policies and pros would be on a stage with many other candidates who are close to qualifying or have qualified.
Brianna Tucker is Washington Post deputy politics editor, joining C-SPAN on the Washington Journal program this morning. Another Reuters article, the Fulton County, Georgia court's website briefly posted a document on Monday listing several criminal charges against former U.S. President Donald Trump that appeared related to his attempt to overturn the 2020 election defeat in the state, before taking the document down without explanation. The Fulton County DA's office said in a statement that no charges have been filed against Donald Trump. Story from Associated Press. Attorneys for Hunter Biden are pushing to keep part of a plea deal they reached with the prosecutor, whose new status as special counsel intensified the tax investigation into the president's son ahead of the 2024 election. Hunter Biden's attorneys argued in court documents late Sunday that an agreement sparing him prosecution on a felony gun charge is still in place, even though the plea agreement on misdemeanor tax offenses largely unraveled during a court appearance last month. That from AP. The Attorney General Merrick Garland on Friday named the U.S. Attorney David Weiss as special counsel in the Hunter Biden investigation. And the White House Press Secretary Kareem JeanPierre was asked today whether President Biden has any reaction.
Can you discuss at all the president's personal reaction to, as a father, of the special counsel being appointed to continue the Hunter Biden probe?
So let me just first say, and you've heard me say this before, that this case was handled independently by the Justice Department under leadership of a Trump-appointed U.S. attorney, as you all know. This is consistent with what the president has been saying for a long while now, going way back to his campaign days, that he would restore the Department of Justice independence from political interference from the White House. And this is, want to make sure that we continue that. Since the White House hasn't been involved, just to be clear again, certainly I would refer you to any questions about this specifically to Department of Justice and certainly to Hunter Biden's personal representatives. I will say this, and you've heard this from the president, is that he loves his son. And he is proud of him overcoming his addiction and how he's continuing to build his life. But I don't have anything else to add to that.
The White House Press Secretary Kareem JeanPierre at her news conference. A story from The Hill newspaper. The House Committee on Oversight and Accountability on Monday released a transcript from a former FBI agent that Republicans say validates a key claim from an IRS whistleblower about management of the tax crimes investigation into Hunter Biden. But Democrats have argued that the interview actually discredits GOP claims of improper political influence in the investigation. Wall Street today, the Dow up 26, NASDAQ up 143, S&P up 25. From the Detroit Free Press, President Joe Biden is asking major U.S. automakers and their workers' union to reach an agreement that takes every possible step to avoid painful plant closings. As the sector transitions to electric vehicles, the president has not been endorsed by the United Auto Workers as he seeks re-election despite his broad support from organized labor going into the 2024 campaign. The UAW represents 146,000 workers at Ford, GM, and Stellantis, which are commonly known as the Big Three automakers. The workers' contracts expires September 14th. The president saying in a statement, the UAW helped create the American middle class, and as we move forward in this transition to new technologies, the UAW deserves a contract that sustains the middle class. That was from the Detroit Free Press. The Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen spoke about the economy today at a training center in Las Vegas operated by another union, the IBEW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers.
The continued strength of our labor market is particularly impressive given our fight against inflation. Last July, I gave a speech about the remarkable resilience of the American economy and our workers in the face of global challenges. There were many who questioned whether that could last. But that's precisely what we've seen over the past year, even as we remain attuned to the significant risks ahead. Annual headline inflation is now nearly 6 percentage points below its June 2022 peak. Today, overall inflation and the unemployment rate both sit below 4%, and our economy continues to expand. And workers are better off than they were last year. Real average hourly earnings have grown over the past year. That means wage gains are outpacing inflation. In fact, in 9 out of 14 major sectors, real wages are growing faster than they were in the decade before the pandemic. And that has had a sizable impact on reducing inequality. One paper estimates that wage gains for lower income workers in recent years have reversed nearly a quarter of the wage inequality that had accumulated over the past 40 years. The administration remains committed to taking actions to lower prices for Americans where we can. And we continue to monitor developments, particularly those abroad, that may affect prices and growth. But I still believe there is a path to continue reducing inflation while maintaining a healthy labor market. While there are risks, the evidence we have seen so far suggests we are on such a path. And Americans are reflecting this optimism. Consumer sentiment is at its highest level in almost 2 years. I expect the important gains that we've made over the past 2.5 years to serve as a source of resilience in the weeks and months to come, even if we see further cooling in our economy.
Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen in Las Vegas at an IBEW union training center. Washington Today continues in a moment.
When citizens are truly informed, our republic thrives. Get informed straight from the source on C-SPAN. Unfiltered, unbiased, word for word. From the nation's capital to wherever you are. Because the opinion that matters the most is your own. This is what democracy looks like. C-SPAN, powered by cable.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast wherever you find your podcasts and on the C-SPAN Now mobile app. 11 years ago today, Austin Tice, an American freelance journalist, was kidnapped in Damascus, Syria while reporting on the Syrian civil war. He's the longest currently held U.S. hostage. No group in Syria, armed or otherwise, or the Syrian government has said it is holding Austin Tice. Deborah Tice, Austin's mother, was at the National Press Club today in Washington, a discussion about why journalist hostages are often the most difficult to free. And she made a direct appeal to President Joe Biden.
So now I'd like to speak to our president. President Biden, it is encouraging to see the pragmatic approach of the United States in its efforts to secure the release of U.S. hostages in Iran. Negotiation and the return of assets to their original owners in order to achieve the return of hostages is a positive development. Such pragmatism, recognizing the interest of all parties, has a proven history of being the best way forward. Today, Austin Tice, my son, has been held in captive in Syria for 11 years. He deserves this pragmatic vision and effort that has been deployed for the Iranian hostages. Mr. President, actions speak louder than words. Show me. Show Austin that Austin has value to you and to his country, that he is worth bringing home. I implore you, reject the hollow posturing of your government, deploy this effective, pragmatic policy in Syria, and bring Austin home for the holidays.
Deborah Tice, mother of journalist Austin Tice, at the National Press Club today on this 11th anniversary of his being kidnapped while reporting in Syria. A National Press Club press release about today's discussion reads in part, when a journalist is taken hostage, it deprives citizens of the information they need to participate in a functioning democracy. And when a hostage is held for 11 years, it makes the government look incredibly weak and disorganized and limits their ability to project power. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on World Press Freedom Day back in May said, "We are extensively engaged with regard to Austin, engaged with Syria, engaged with third countries, seeking to find a way to get him home, and we're not going to relent until we do." And the FBI Washington field office tweeted just a couple of days ago, Austin Tice was detained in Damascus, Syria 11 years ago this week. The FBI is committed to bringing Austin home and continues to seek information leading to his return. You can find information on how to directly and securely submit tips, and there was a link attached. Senior U.S. House Republicans are responding with concerns over the tentative agreement between Iran and the U.S., which would set free 5 detained Iranian Americans in Iran and unfreeze $6 billion in Iranian assets held in South Korea. House Foreign Affairs Committee Chair Michael McCaul, Republican from Texas, on Fox News Sunday yesterday, pointing to the $6 billion being much larger than the $400 million that was part of the original Iran nuclear agreement under President Obama and could, in Congressman McCaul's words, support Iran's proxy war, terror operations, and nuclear bomb aspirations in the Middle East. And the House Intelligence Committee Chair Michael Turner was interviewed on CBS's Face the Nation on Sunday.
We have not received the terms of the deal or even what the proposed deal is. The administration has signaled that the release of these detainees is part of a broader negotiation with respect to reinstating some controls on the nuclear weapons and enrichment programs of Iran dating back to the JCPOA. And the concern is that New York Times has reported is that the administration may be pursuing an informal deal as opposed to the formal deal that we had before that had congressional oversight. Mm-hmm. And what we don't want, obviously, everybody wants the detainees to come home and the hostages to come home. We want the administration to work diligently to bring Americans home, whether they're in Iran or Russia or elsewhere. And our hearts certainly go out for them. But in this instance, the administration is signaling that this is part of a broader deal concerning Iran's enrichment program. And if that becomes a secret deal, then that's obviously a great concern to Congress.
These are de-escalatory first steps. You would consider that a what? I mean, are you opposed to what the administration is trying to do? I mean, there has been reporting, and CBS has also confirmed that Iran has, at least reduced some of its nuclear development.
Well, actually, there's no real reports of anything being reduced. They're currently at 60% enrichment.
I'm sure you read the Wall Street Journal report that had
they were at
specifics on
3.5.
uranium.
They were at 3.5% of the JCPOA.
Yes.
They're at 60%. They had 1 year breakout with getting to the enrichment level that could result in a weapon. They're now weeks away. Freezing them now, where before in the JCPOA agreement, they actually surrendered some of the enrichment that they'd had that was over the levels that were sought. In this, if we just have a deal that freezes where Iran is, and really without the understanding of all aspects of their program, because they had thrown out the UN inspectors from the IAEA, they'd removed the cameras from the sites, we really don't have the fidelity of understanding of where they are or what they're doing at
So
this
you
point.
would support a broader diplomatic deal and negotiations with Iran to achieve that?
Absolutely, and certainly negotiations, I think, as they're going forward, are certainly critical. But the terms of the deal are absolutely important because, last time we had an insufficient inspection regime. We had terms that were critical that expired. In this instance, they appear to be careening toward a deal that would be informal, not subject to congressional oversight, because we wouldn't know all the terms. In the last deal, it actually came before Congress for a vote. They had to disclose what the deals were.
I remember.
Right. And at this point, if it's informal, what we're concerned about is we don't want a secret deal with Iran.
The House Intelligence Committee Chair, Congressman Mike Turner, Republican from Ohio, on CBS's Face the Nation on Sunday. Today, the State Department Deputy Spokesperson Vedant Patel was asked for an update on the status of this potential deal with Iran to free 5 Americans in exchange for unfreezing the $6 billion in Iranian assets held in South Korea.
What's the thinking behind this staggered approach where these people have been released into house arrest? What's the order of things and how we can expect things to unfold now in terms of the transfer of funds, the release of Iranian prisoners in the U.S., and their release from Iran? Will those other steps can you say whether those other steps won't be taken until the Americans are outside of Iran?
So I'm not going to get into the specifics of the process, as it continues to be a very active and ongoing situation. But Simon, to be quite clear, we would want nothing more than for these American citizens to be back in the United States immediately. And we continue to believe that to be the case because they are wrongfully, unjustly detained. And we continue to that to be the case for every American national who is wrongfully detained around the world. But this is an ongoing process. This, as we were quite clear last week, is a positive step. It's an ongoing negotiation, but we're certainly not going to rest until we have brought them back to the United States.
Vedant Patel, the State Department deputy spokesperson at his news conference, he was also asked about the larger negotiations that may be happening between the U.S. and Iran.
What implications does this deal have for a potential nuclear deal talks with Iran?
So this, as you heard me said, this is a positive step. It's a positive step. Let me be clarified. It's a positive step in our hope and desire for these American citizens to be able to come home. But it is not linked to any other issue, and we have not changed any aspect of our overall approach to Iran, whether it be their nuclear program. Our belief continues to be, and our goal continues to be, that Iran will not obtain a nuclear weapon. But also as it relates to the other issues that I mentioned, their malign activities in the region, their human rights crackdowns, our views, our work on that has not changed.
So there hasn't been any movement on the nuclear front?
As I said, these are unlinked issues.
State Department Deputy Spokesperson Vedant Patel at a news conference at the State Department in Washington. Jerusalem Post has an article, Iran never has and never will seek a temporary or interim nuclear agreement, Iranian foreign minister told Iranian media on Monday. From AFP, the U.S. Chief of Naval Operations stepped down Monday, leaving an unprecedented 3 branches of the country's military without confirmed leaders due to a standoff with a single senator over Pentagon abortion policy. Senator Tommy Tuberville, a Republican, is stalling the approval of more than 300 U.S. military nominees to protest Defense Department efforts to assist troops who must travel to receive reproductive health care that is unavailable where they are stationed. The officers selected to head the Army, Navy, and Marine Corps are among the nominees Senator Tuberville is keeping from being quickly approved by the Senate via unanimous consent. That reporting from AFP. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, one of the speakers at today's relinquishment of command ceremony for the Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Michael Gilday.
Now, this is indeed a proud day, but I want to take a moment to mark a painful milestone. As you know, more than 300 nominations for our outstanding general and flag officers are now being held up in the United States Senate. That includes our top uniformed leaders and our next Chief of Naval Operations. Because of this blanket hold, starting today, for the first time in the history of the Department of Defense, 3 of our military services are operating without Senate-confirmed leaders. This is unprecedented, it is unnecessary, and it is unsafe. And this sweeping hold is undermining America's military readiness. It's hindering our ability to retain our very best officers. And it is upending the lives of far too many American military families. Our troops deserve better. Our military families deserve better. And our allies and partners deserve better. And our national security deserves better. So let me say again that smooth and swift transitions of confirmed leadership are central to the defense of the United States and to the full strength of the most lethal fighting force in history. And it's time for the Senate to confirm all of our superbly qualified military nominees, including the 33rd Chief of Naval Operations. Ladies and gentlemen, all around the planet, U.S. Navy ships help to build a world that is more free, more just, and more secure. Our sailors never waver, and they never give up the ship. And their idealism reflects our country's highest values of democracy and freedom. Our sailors are the reason why the United States has the finest Navy in human history. And thanks to you, the sight of an American flag fluttering in a sea breeze from a gray Navy hull renews the faith of free people in a more hopeful world. So thank you to all of the men and women of the United States Navy. May God bless you, and may God continue to bless the United States of America. Thank you very much.
Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin at today's relinquishment of command ceremony for the Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Michael Gilday. Admiral Lisa Franchetti, currently Vice Chief of Naval Operations, has been nominated to the chief position and will lead in an acting capacity. When the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Mark Milley, retires at the end of September, as the law requires, that position will be added to the list of the acting commanders, along with the Navy, Army, and Marine Corps, if the nomination standoff with Senator Tuberville is not resolved. And that will mean 4 out of the 8 positions on the Joint Chiefs of Staff will not have a permanent Senate-confirmed leader. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word. Get the stories being talked about in Washington emailed to you every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.